Huh? Yeah. It's not on a Zoom for me. Yeah, exactly. They can make one. No, just they do it. Oh, okay. Can I speak from anywhere, or do I have to like? No, you can speak. You can speak from anywhere. Oh, yeah. How long do you usually wait then? Well, we could start the introduction. Sure. Well, maybe, and I'll mention the upcoming events. Okay. I think we'll get started if everybody can grab a seat. Thanks for coming to this December TCRG Brown Bag. We do have a good, this is a monthly thing, we do have a good schedule coming in for 2015. Just want to make you aware of. In January, we're going to have Leah Goldstein from the Improve Group, or somebody from her staff, talking about culturally appropriate methodologies for research and evaluation. February, Peter Siborowski from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, talking about determining Minnesota's carbon footprint. March, Professor David Levinson from the Civil Engineering Department at BU, talking about transportation access. April, Professor Laura Kolumbakidis, she's also the state economist, talking about Minnesota's economy. In May, Todd Graham from Met Council, talking about Census American Community Survey. So that's 5 good seminars. Hope we can see you there. We'll get to our speaker for today in just a minute, but we do like to start off with some introductions. Also, I'll mention just for housekeeping, there's a restroom kind of across the hall. There's a check box going around. If you miss it, if you can make sure you get it by before you leave, that would be helpful to us to know who's here. And with that, why don't we start over here for introduction?
So he has 1 year research. I'm Jeff Petty with Hampton County. And maybe next. Tim Zimmerman, Stephen Baker, Ramsey County Assessor.
And Raw Ramsey County Assessor.
MB.
Sheldon McRae, Minnesota Senate.
Jeff Matson, University of Minnesota.
I'm Patrick Regular Research. Lindsay Young, Westside Road. Janet Guthrie, Ramsey County Manager. Kira Hill, Lucas. Kayla Muller, Assistant. Sarah McGarrett, Improve Group.
Neil Young, Deed. Peter Mathis, Wildwood Research.
Jen Hasbrook, City of Oakdale. Hi, I'm Andy Egbert with the State Demographic Center. Megan Dayton, with the State Demographic Center.
And just coming in? Just an introduction.
Hi.
Sorry to put you on the spot. Great. Our speaker today is Tim O'Neill from DEED, Labor Market Information Office. He's the Twin Cities Regional Analyst for the Office of Labor Market Information. He's here to talk. We decided that we wanted to have some broad exposure to DEED's data tools. So I think Jim's going to be talking about a wide variety of those tools. So Tim has a bachelor's degree in history and political science from St. Olaf and a master's degree in public policy from the Humphrey School at the University of Minnesota. With that, we'll turn over to Tim.
Cool. Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. I'm glad you are spending part of your day learning about DEED tools here. It's actually really cool. In my short 2 years of being a regional analyst, I was actually an analyst up in northwest Minnesota based out of Brainerd for a year, and I just got transferred down to the Twin Cities. But in my 2 short years here, I've discovered that labor market information is just becoming really popular, much more so than even my first year on the job. And I believe a lot of that has to do with some of the information I give at the beginning here. It's always kind of a guarantee that when you have a regional analyst come present, you're going to get an update on what's going on in the state of Minnesota and the region. So look forward to that. Get excited. But yes, I think with the tightening of the labor markets, just trying to find employment in today's economy in Minnesota, I think labor market information is just extremely useful for getting ahead of the game when you're a job seeker or an employer trying to it's kind of interesting. Look for employers. It's kind of gone from a creative job search for job seekers to a creative, let's find our workforce needs. So that's kind of the basis of this presentation, just showing the resources upon resources. I kind of stole from Carl Sagan there, billions upon billions. We're not going to go over that many resources, awesome, but there are quite a few resources. It's almost overwhelming, the amount of resources that LMI has on its website. So I'm just going to kind of highlight a few of those. I guess I'll do a brief hands of who is familiar with these LMI resources. Oh my gosh. So if you are, I'm extremely sorry. This might be a little numbing. But it is nice to get a refresher. And for those of you who aren't familiar with these resources, yes, I've got a handout that will, it's nice to have a physical copy of the resources that are out there. But it's nice to see just what's out there, what's new, and what's upcoming. I don't need to speak entirely for the whole hour, so we'll have time for questions at the end. But if you have a question about something that I bring up, if something looks interesting or weird, I do bring up some information from the Minnesota State Demographic Center. So if it looks completely wrong or I say things out of line, feel free to say something. But yeah, questions anytime are always welcome. So the Labor Market Information Office, I'm sure you're all familiar with it. If you're not, you can always look at the slide. And I think, are the PowerPoints available after this or passing around? Okay, cool. And I should say that there's going to be a lot of tables, a lot of data, a lot of graphs. I break the rules of PowerPoint almost all the time. So don't worry so much about the data that's on here or even the data that I'm going to talk about. The main point of this presentation is just to know what data sources are out there and what you can get your hands on. But yes, the cool thing about the state of Minnesota is that we do have regional analysts, and our job is to really look at all this data that comes out. Most of these tools that I'm going to talk about today, such as the Graduate Employment Outcomes Tool, Employment Projections, these are all tools that are put together and put out by other analysts within our Labor Market Information Office. The analyst's job is to look through the data, see if anything looks interesting or unique, and I guess I describe my job as doing homework for other people free of charge. So if you ever need help, you always can just come right to the regional analyst, and we'll be happy to help out with anything that you need in terms of labor market information. So here's that guaranteed section, what's going on in the state of Minnesota and the economy. There's actually just a national jobs release a couple of days ago, and things are looking really bright overall in the nation. 300, I got to write some numbers down. I was a history major, so I don't remember all the numbers. But 321,000 jobs gained from October to November in the nation, and the average over the last 12 months has been around 224,000. So just a really strong month in October going into November. Most of that growth we saw was in professional and business services, retail, trade, manufacturing, and healthcare. Of course, healthcare has always been, or has lately been, the biggest growing sector in Minnesota and the nation. It's projected to be the biggest growing going forward. Unemployment, 5.8%, it stayed there, and then you can also look at things like the average work week, 34.4 hours average. And that's national data. The cool thing about Minnesota's data is that it's always pretty similar. We see pretty similar trends, so it'll be really cool to see what numbers we have coming out in November here. And that usually happens on the 17th, around the 17th of the month. So stay tuned for that. As of our October data, though, it's still really great news for Minnesota. We gained 9,500 jobs in October from September to October, and that's after a string of 2 other really awesome months. So over a 3-month span, Minnesota gained over 28,000 jobs. It's the strongest three-month time period that Minnesota has had in terms of employment growth on record, and that's going back to 1990. Minnesota has gained over 212,000 jobs since the end of the recession in 2009. That's an average of 46,000 jobs gained every year. So we're seeing really strong growth in just total number of jobs. Another point of good news, really low unemployment, and I'm sure you guys have seen that too. It's really popular. Probably one of our most popular tools, our local area unemployment statistics, just because it's a leading economic indicator. It's really popular with the media and economists. And you can also track it through time. And right now, Minnesota's at 3.9%, really, really low. That still represents about 116,000 unemployed Minnesotans. So we still have untapped employment that we can go into, unemployment that we can go into. But we are nearing that that full potential, the full employment here in the state of Minnesota, targeted to be between 3.5% and 4.5%. So we're either at it or extremely close. The points of concern, some of them kind of stem from the good news that we have actually. With so many jobs coming back, we're starting to see a tightening of the labor force. So for those that are looking for jobs right now, it's going to be actually a lot more competitive trying to get those jobs. So they have to be really on top of their game. In terms of employers, the regional analysts and our research look at what the workforce investment boards are saying, what city councils are saying, what employers are saying. And we just hear a lot recently of we're having trouble finding the needs that we need for our workforce. So for both job seekers and employers, with the tightening of the labor market here, things are becoming more challenging.
Then does your data at all distinguish between, I know it does distinguish between public and private sector, right? Does it distinguish between jobs that are subsidized to the public sector at all? That are like bought through taxpayers' money?
I actually don't know that for sure. I'd have to get back to you on that. Good question.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll talk to you afterwards here. It doesn't?
No. That's what Orion or
Okay. Yes, if anybody knows any information that I don't know, feel free to pipe up. In terms of unemployment, really low, which is great news. But again, one of the more popular things, just because Minnesota is doing so well in terms of unemployment, people are starting now to look at these unemployment disparities. And in Minnesota, they're actually pretty stark when it comes to different demographics, from race and ethnicities to age and education, things like that. So they're starting to tackle these things, and the data is showing that, fortunately, the disparities are there, but they're coming down quite a bit in recent years. And then lastly, the aging population and workforce, labor force. It's not a phenomenon unique to Minnesota, but as I've read in your report. But it is something that Minnesota is going to have to, it's going to be competing with other states, other countries, other places of the world for their workforce needs. So this is going to have a big impact on our employment projections, which is one of the things I'll showcase here near the end. When we look at our data, we can break all this down by regions. We can break it down by industries. And so that's the point of this slide. We can look at MSAs. We can look at counties. We can look at cities. So all this data is actually really powerful stuff, and we can break it down for pretty detailed information. So looking at the industry stats, this is from October of last year to the most recent October. Things are looking actually really nice. Blue is good, red is bad. So across the board, we're seeing a lot of employment gains here in Minnesota. It's nice to see manufacturing and construction near the top, just because these are jobs that are going to typically have higher wages, and they're also going to support jobs beneath them. If you go into our data, and I'm sure many of you have, but for those of you who haven't, these are the super sectors. So education and health services, for instance, is combined here. I have no idea why they do that, but they do. But you can go into specific industry sectors to pretty detailed levels. For instance, manufacturing. In the slide later, it shows that what we're projecting that manufacturing is going to remain largely stagnant over the next 10 years. But if you look at certain sectors of manufacturing, for instance, fabricated metal manufacturing, transportation equipment manufacturing, food manufacturing, these are areas of manufacturing that are actually going to do pretty well over the next 10 years and are showing really nice growth in the last couple of years. Another example, financial activities. You can see here it's showing negative employment gains over the year, but real estate rental and leasing is a part of financial activities, and that's an area that's actually doing pretty well. So just keep in mind, if you see something that you don't like, you can definitely go in depth with these industries within our tools and see what's the big picture, what's actually happening for my industry sector or the one I'm interested in. So all this data that I've already shown, the industry sectors, the regional look at the MSAs, and then just the overall picture that I presented, that's all from our current employment statistics tool. It's one of the largest surveys of its kind in the nation, 400,000 businesses. Here in Minnesota, it's about 6,000 businesses. And I've got the slide here with the link, so when you guys get these PowerPoints, you can check them out, and I also put them in the handout. But if you guys want to get a more detailed look at any of these tools, feel free to come to me afterwards, and I can show you on the computer how to get to them step by step. One of the nice things about our DEED LMI website is that when you go to these sites, when you go to this link, for instance, it'll give a really nice description of the tool actually where I copied and pasted a lot of this stuff. But it'll also give you the methodology, how it's put together, and some step-by-steps of how to get to the data. And actually, if you go to our quarterly census of employment and wages, the step-by-step is actually almost too much. It'll say like, click on next to go to the next step. Click on next again, hit submit, and it'll give you really detailed step-by-step. But that's actually really nice because of the number of tools that's so overwhelming with Beat LMI, it's nice to have those step-by-steps in case you forgot, how to get to the information that you want to get. And with that, our quarterly census of employment and wages, really similar data to the CES, employment, wages. You can look at industry sectors, different regions. But one of the biggest pros of this guy is that it's through the unemployment insurance program. All employers are required to report employment and wages. So the data you see is really accurate stuff, and it covers 97% of Minnesota's total employment. Another big pro is that you can get really in-depth with it. The CES, as we saw before, really only looks at the state, the U.S., and some certain MSAs within the state of Minnesota. With the quarterly census of employment and wages, you can look at counties, you can look at certain cities, you can look at different regions. So it's the tool to go to if you really want to get in-depth industry information for your region. One of the data limitations is that it takes time to get this information put together, so there's typically a 6-month lifetime. And sometimes you'll run into data suppression, especially if you're in greater Minnesota or smaller areas. But for the metro area here, you're probably not going to run into that problem too much. And then this is some of the data, just a taste of it, that you can get from our quarterly census. So here I looked at the lowest annual points of the recession, 2010, and the most recent annual data we have. And you can see, again, across the board, Minnesota is actually doing really well. Public administration. It's great that I got my job in government. But yeah, once again, that's just the manufacturing and construction near the top. And healthcare, of course, is almost always at the top. You can also look at more in-depth stuff. Hospitals, specialty trade contractors, largest growing, it is fastest growing. I always get questions about what oil and gas extraction. Well, there's only like 50 oil and gas extraction employees in the state of Minnesota. So when they grew by about 5, 10 people, it showed huge growth. So when you do go into this tool, you can do, you can download all these things. All of our tools, there's always an option to download the data into Excel and play around with it. So that's what I did here, and that's what you guys can do too, if you're super excited about these tools. But yeah, keep that in mind when looking at percentage growth. So those are really the tools on industry and wages. You can look at trends and a whole bunch of things like that. See which ones are the most distinguished in your area, which ones are growing the most, which ones are declining. But yeah, if you guys have any questions on those two tools, be free to, happy to answer them.
I'm curious, the monthly CES and how much revision happens. Would you encourage folks to use those typically? I mean, at a state level, I know they're back to life, so curious, what degree of?
Yeah, great question. And actually, it kind of goes back to, I was talking about the last 3 months have been the strongest 3 in Minnesota. That's before we've revised the numbers yet. And we do revise them every month. So I think for October, it actually increased from like 8,000 some gained over that month to 10,000 plus over that month. So you do see these monthly revisions, but every year in March, I believe it is, these CES numbers are benchmarked to the quarterly census of employment and wages, which is data required. So that is that's universal data. It's not survey data. So when we benchmark these CES numbers to that quarterly census every year, historically the revisions have been pretty minimal. I don't remember the percentage difference off the top of my head, but it's very minimal, and I can get that number for you after the presentation here. We had a couple of months in the summer here where Minnesota was showing markedly kind of crazy numbers coming out of the CES, and we'd have to revise them upwards because they were pretty low. So we were kind of wondering about the confidence of the CES numbers coming out, but once again, the revisions are always very minimal at the end of the year. Unemployment. So unemployment is our most popular data tool. I got to say it's, from my point of view and from job seekers' points of view, it's probably one of the most boring data tools we have. Very dry. But then again, it's a leading economic indicator. The media loves it. Cities love it. just to see where things have been, where they're going, where they're at. So here you can see seasonally adjusted Minnesota and U.S. data for unemployment stats, and then Hennepin County, anything below the state in the U.S. is not going to be seasonally adjusted, and that's where you can really see these seasonal variations, and that's just a thing that happens in Minnesota. Yeah, so we peaked at 10% in the U.S., 8.3% in Minnesota during the recession, and now we're at 3.9% in Minnesota and 5.8% in the U.S. So things are coming down really nicely. Once again, I said though, it still represents 116,000 or so Minnesotans that are actively looking for work and can't find it yet. So we still have some untapped workforce to go into. Blue is good, red is bad. That's not political at all. But even the red here, so for instance, I always pick on Clearwater County. If you've been in my presentations before, I always pick on them. Just because they typically have, I've got one down here higher, but they typically have the highest unemployment in the state. Right now it's 6.7%, and I say only because it's been above 20% recently. And one of the biggest reasons for that is there's only really one major town in Clearwater, Bagley, Minnesota, and then there's 2 Native American reservations in the north and the south. And like we saw at the beginning of my presentation, demographics and disparities have become kind of a big thing right now in Minnesota. So when we look at those numbers, here's kind of an overview of the last couple of, last decade or so of a select number of demographics. So you can see that the black African American unemployment rate has typically been 2 to 3 times higher than the unemployment rate. And then the teenage unemployment rate has been the highest of any age category in Minnesota. Like I said before though, I gotta look at my numbers here, but things are coming down really nicely. For instance, the black African American unemployment rate a year ago was 10.8%, or it was 15%, and now it's 10.8%. So it's coming down quite a bit. The teenager unemployment rate a year ago was 15.3%, now it's 12.3%. So it's nice to see that with so many jobs coming back, with the unemployment rate going down overall, we're finally starting to see these different demographics, these different disparities, their unemployment rate go down as well. This is another measure of unemployment that we typically don't see. So when the unemployment numbers come out every month, you only really see the official unemployment rate, the U3 level that comes out to the BLS in our website. There's 3 additional levels above that. The U4 level is the discouraged workers. These are people that are no longer looking for any work because they don't feel there's any opportunities out there for them. So right here, the official unemployment rate was 4.2% in Minnesota at the time. The U4 level, the discouraged one, it goes up to 4.5%. These are the marginally attached workers. They looked for work within the past year, but for some reason or another, it could be healthcare related, maybe they had a child, something like that. They didn't look for work in the last 4 weeks from the survey. If you add those in, it goes up to 5.2%. This is as of October. And then the last giant one here is the part-time underemployed, the U6 level. These are people that are working part-time, but they want to work full-time. And if we add that in, the unemployment rate goes up to 9%. Again, we've seen some market decreases since the height of the recession, but these are still areas that U4, 5, and 6, where employers can tap into these areas and fill their workforce needs.
Yeah, the part-time underemployed, if you've got multiple part-time jobs that add up to 40 hours, what group are they?
I actually do not know. I know you can actually check out the survey through the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it'll ask, you know, are you employed right now? Are you looking for work if you're not? The time frame of you're looking for work, things like that. I'm not sure if they would actually add those, you know, if you're working.
I read some articles that there's a number of people like that type that are in the employment numbers, but then clearly they're not getting benefits and they're struggling in terms of, you know, scheduling your stuff and your commute times are doubled and whatever. So
yeah, I'm not positive off the top of my head.
I can't think people would choose 2 part-time jobs voluntarily.
No, that'd be tough. Was there another question? Yeah.
So where do you find these stats on your website? So is this available?
This is actually, yeah, this is now available on our website.
Okay.
So if you go,
look at the U4 through U6.
Yep. So on our website, I'll actually just go over how to get to our data tools right now because it's nice to see an overview. I'll awkwardly go over to the computer here. But from the Deed main website, hopefully you guys are familiar with. Very nice and colorful. There's these really big tabs here, like again, nice and colorful. Data is almost an afterthought here on the right, a little gray, kind of boring. But actually a lot of really cool stuff in this data tab. And all the tools that I've talked about and will talk about are in this tab. If you're zoning out, forgot what I said, or not listening, whatever, I would recommend just clicking on the data tab. And the nice thing about this method of finding the data is that it gives little descriptions of what's going on, so you don't need to call or remember. And then you can click right on data tools to get to any of the data tools. And again, it gives a little description of that tool when you go to that page. For finding the alternative measures that we've been looking at for unemployment, go to current economic highlights. And then it's under alternative measures of unemployment. So all the numbers and the charts and stuff like that, I just copied and pasted from here. Yep. And this is something that we've just started doing recently, just because this data is becoming more popular, more in demand, especially with the unemployment rate going down and employers looking for their workforce needs. Where are we going to tap into what is the state of unemployment right now?
You publish confidence intervals, like say for that disparity analysis there?
I would have to talk to, we have an analyst, Amanda Rohrer, who puts this information together. I would need to talk to her.
Great.
And if you do want to know about that, I would suggest, yes, contacting Amanda. If you need her contact information, or anybody's contact information in LMI, just hover over data, talk to our experts. And if you guys just want to go now and find information later, you can just come to this site and contact us. There I am. But yeah, Amanda's here at the top here. Or she's not there.
You can call the helpline.
You can call the helpline. Yep. She is on the helpline actually quite a bit, so here's the helpline. But yeah, another method, if you know exactly what tool you want to go for and you're all set to go, I would just hover over data and then hover over data tools, and you can find all the tools right here. I'm until 1 o'clock, right? Okay. Yeah, question?
Any of those tools that you just highlighted illustrate where public subsidies are going into certain businesses and different sectors in the state in terms of economic development?
No, I don't believe so.
That's a totally different. We do have that. On our website, we have business subsidy reports.
Okay.
That's in a different unit.
Oh, I thought you asked.
Yeah.
Yep, actually, one of the tabs was for businesses, and I'm guessing it would probably be in there. And the contact information for that would be in there as well. But yeah, check out Neil after the presentation here. Here are another number. Here are some other great resources for finding unemployment data here in the state of Minnesota or the nation. BLS is always great, and the geographic profile of employment and unemployment. You can find demographic-related information. And you can also find, for instance, long-term unemployment. That's where you can get some of those great numbers. DisabilityStatistics.org, anything related to disability statistics, I would check out that site. And then here's that site that we have on our deed, the alternative measures. So the next tool, if there's no further questions on unemployment, is our job vacancy survey. So a lot of the tools that I've showcased so far are actually required for the LMI office to put together. The job vacancy survey, this is a tool that Minnesota actually helped develop, and only a handful of states actually use the job vacancy survey. It's actually kind of crazy. I'm on the helpline and I get calls sometimes. I got a call from Alaska the other day and they're like, hey, we saw your job vacancy survey. We want to do one too. It's like, cool, Alaska. But yes, it's actually a really awesome tool. We survey 10,000, 11,000 employers across the state of Minnesota. It's a stratified survey. We always hit some of the major employers just because they're so important for that area in the state. But we do try to get a nice palette of the employers that are out there. So from our latest Q2 2014 survey, there was about 84,000 vacancies reported in the state of Minnesota. And going back in time, you can definitely see that the number of vacancies is going up since the end of the recession. That makes sense. And then comparing to unemployment, you can look at the number of unemployed per vacancy. So right now it's about 1.6 unemployed persons chasing each vacancy in Minnesota. During the height of the recession, quarter 2, 2009, there's between 7 and 8 unemployed persons chasing each vacancy. So it's just, like I said at the beginning, it's becoming a lot more competitive for those people chasing those vacancies now. The other cool thing beyond just looking at kind of the overall data from this survey, you can break it down by industry sector, and this of course makes sense, healthcare at the top, retail trade, and manufacturing and accommodation and food services. And then you can also look at occupational data, which is awesome, especially when you're a job seeker. I speak to a lot of job seekers, and this is one of the first tools that I get to where they can look up occupations and get excited about finding out which occupations are more in demand, what are the wages like, and then you can also look up characteristics like what percentage of these vacancies are part-time, what percentage require post-secondary education, what percentage require related work experience, and then what are the median wage offers. So the job vacancy survey, when I'm talking to job seekers, I say that it's kind of a jumping off point for which areas are going to have the most demand right now in Minnesota, and what are the characteristics of that demand like.
Is the survey that you use also available on the website? Or in some instances, you said, oh, you can download the survey for the job vacancy. Is that also available?
You know, I don't know if I don't think the actual survey is available online. But if you go to talk to our experts and contact Orion, she kind of leads the job vacancy survey. I can definitely ask her about this. Yeah.
There's been reports out of, I think it was Georgetown maybe 2 years ago, predicting that in next year, 70% of the new job openings will require some kind of post-secondary degree. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Have you done that kind of, I mean, like, to look at this list, looks like most of them.
Oh yeah, I kind of.
I mean, but have you done that kind of analysis for Minnesota job vacancies? What percentage and what is that percentage?
Yeah, I don't know the actual percentage off the top of my head, but we have definitely done things like that, and I actually have, when we get to employment projections, kind of stealing thunder away from my later part, but we do look at Georgetown. We feel like we pick on them quite a bit, just because the methodology they use. So they're looking at, when you're looking at education, there's kind of 2 ways to look at it with occupations. You can either look at what is the typical education and training required for that job, and then you can also look at what do current job holders have for education and training. And the Georgetown report looks at that latter one. They're looking at, okay, so for example, in waiters and waitresses, this percentage of jobs of workers in Minnesota right now in that job have bachelor's degrees, and this percentage have graduate degrees, so on and so forth. Then they take that percentage and they project it forward. So this share have bachelor's degrees in advanced education. We're going to need this many with that education in the future. But you don't really need bachelor's degree or more to be a waiter or waitress, or any occupation similar to that. So our methodology, if you look at we've got educational projections. When we do it, we look at the training and education typically required for the job as set forward by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Sometimes it's a little fuzzy about the education typically required. For instance, nursing, registered nurses. The minimal is associate's degree, but we all know that you probably need a bachelor's degree. But for most jobs, it's pretty clear cut. And I do have a slide, I guess I'll just steal this under, but according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the #1 education attainment level required for the majority of jobs going forward is you don't even need a high school diploma, or a high school diploma. And then the second one is you don't even need a high school diploma. So yeah, it's looking forward. Most jobs will not require post-secondary education. And our job vacancy survey here, you can see it reflects that. These are the top 12 occupations with the most openings as of our last survey release. And I highlighted the ones that require more education.
If you want to know a lot of the topics, it's great to ask you on data comparison.
Yep, for sure. And actually, we do have specific numbers, but I didn't put that on these slides. But I can forward that to you.
Yeah, I mean, at Georgetown study, it's a huge amount of that, and higher education is all over that. You need us to get a job, and just I wonder about whether or not that's overselling.
Right. Yep. And actually, talking with Dave, he's our projections guy. Dave Senf, he feels that it's between kind of the two estimates. The one that we do saying, most of the jobs are not going to require post-secondary education, and then the Georgetown one saying that 75% or so of jobs going by 2017 or something are going to require post-secondary education. So yeah, I'll definitely send that out to you, and if anyone else is interested, let me know. I'll send those slides out to you. Yeah, that was the job vacancy survey. Yeah.
Does anybody actually look at jobs that provide a livable wage and what they require?
Actually,
when I look at the amount you make for high school diploma or less, I don't know how you would have that.
yeah, that's another awesome question, and we actually have another data tool that just came out. I've got 2 slides on it later on, but we just came out with the cost of living calculator, and it looks at a basic needs budget for families and individuals in the state of Minnesota. You can break it down by 7 different categories, from food, transportation, healthcare, taxes, so on and so forth, a whole bunch. And yes, it exactly points out what you just said. Looking at the basic needs budget overall for an individual in Minnesota and for a family, it falls in, if you compare it to our OES data, it falls in between the 25th and the 50th percentile for the wages. And starting wages are usually around the 10th percentile. And as you see, a lot of these jobs are not even close to that for the median wage overall in Minnesota. So yes, it's interesting to talk about the strengths and the weaknesses in Minnesota right now, just because so many jobs are coming back and unemployment is so low. But jobs, the wages have been really stagnant since the end of the recession. And looking at that cost of living calculator, yeah, wages is the number, I think, the #1 issue looking forward. So yeah, I've got the link for the cost of living calculator later on, so get excited for that when it comes. So the graduate employment outcomes is another brand new tool, fairly new tool that we have. Are you guys familiar with this tool? Okay, I see a couple of familiar faces that have probably seen it. But this is a really awesome tool. Like the quarterly census of employment and wages, it's not a survey. It's actually, so the data you see when you go into this tool is data that it is. It's a collaboration between BEAD and the Office of Higher Education. And so through the Office of Higher Education, they're looking at Social Security numbers of students that are in a whole bunch of different programs. And then they're tracked through those Social Security numbers through the unemployment insurance program. So then we could see, are they finding employment? Are they finding full-time employment? What are their wages like? And then we can look at wages tracked over time. So it's a really great tool for prospective students, parents, anybody really that's thinking about going into post-secondary education, for setting realistic expectations of what they're going to find after completing that program. So again, you can look at employment, full-time employment, and earning. This is a crazy graph. It's showing basically that with more education, your wages will go up. And with more education, the different industry sectors that you're going to be employed in are going to change.
What happens if you go out of state? Are they lost? I saw in-state real quickly.
Yeah. Great question.
Do we know what share that is? Or what
yep. So that's one of the things about this tool. It just looks at graduates, Minnesota graduates, and then it just looks at employment data from Minnesota employers. So if you are a Minnesota graduate and then you find work in Washington, D.C. or elsewhere, you're not going to be reported in the graduate employment outcomes tool. Actually, I'll show you this tool because it's one of our new tools here. So from our website, like all of our tools, you can find it through hovering over data and then data tools, and then it's the graduate employment outcomes. And one of the things that we're doing with a lot of our tools lately is kind of having this interactive Tableau right up front. And it's nice if you want to find some really, quick information, because you can click right on the program area you're interested in and the award level for this one. And then once you do that, it updates the information right away. That's again, one of the things that our office is working on a lot, just because labor market information, it's trends, it's a lot of numbers. Sometimes it's pretty tedious to get to that information, so having this Tableau will really make it easier, and we're hoping to have our websites and data be more user-friendly. So If you're past user-friendly, though, and you want to go right into the data tool, click right on the data tool here. And this is where you can really find specific information. So let's say you're a student. So I was a history student. Kind of depressing to look at this. So it's history, bachelor's. I'll just do all. I'll do bachelor's. And then I'll do, so we've got June of 2011 to June of 2012 for the latest data we have. And you might think that's dated, but it's actually looking at that graduating class up through 2013 now. But yeah, we've got data now that's new from the 2006 to 2009 cohort. And when you do this, you can see how these graduates are doing 4 years after graduating. So then just hit View Results. So for history majors, the 2006 to 2009 cohort in the state of Minnesota, all institution types, you can see how many graduates there were a year after, and then you can see what their median hourly wage was. So you can see it's okay. And then 2 years after, you can see how that wage increases. So it's nice to see that increase there. And then 4 years after, even more increase. And then the other nice thing is, where are these graduates? What industries are they going into for employment? So it's great to see history going into educational services. That totally makes sense. And if you want to see the top 5, click right on that graph icon. So if you do that for history.
Do you know if the wages are inflation adjusted, so are those constant dollars over those different time horizons?
I believe, yes. I believe they're 2007. But I don't want to make stuff up. So the analyst that designed this tool, Alessia Liebert, she was really the one that spearheaded this tool. So if you have any really crazy detailed questions, I would totally suggest contacting Alessia, and I can get that information to you at the end here. But yeah, she's done a great job with this. And if you're actually familiar with our occupations and demand tool, she does that as well, and our hiring difficulty survey. So she's doing a lot of work for the Labor Market Information Office. So you can see here, history majors, most of them are in educational services, and that's what showed at first. Great, but then you can see that retail trade, healthcare and social assistance, a lot of other ones that you wouldn't necessarily think history majors would go into, that's where they're going.
You said an important thing, that this is all based on wage and well, to the extent that graduates go off and open small businesses or partners somewhere, they don't show up here, right?
Right, yep. So the ones, yeah, so federal employees won't show up, non-employers, so people starting up their own businesses, and then people going out of state. And we actually, on this employment status, another area that you might not have thought about, but students continuing their education. So we're looking at history here. We can see % graduates with reported wages. And then you can see % continuing their education. And sometimes it's fairly high, especially if you're looking at associate's degrees. That's kind of a jumping point for going on to bachelor's degrees. And then here's the employment outcome unknown. And again, that could be due to a number of reasons. So unemployed, self-employed, employed at federal agencies, or employed out of state. So there is some information that you're not going to be able to get to. But overall, it's a great tool for, yes, for setting these realistic expectations. Because I feel that's one of the main strengths of labor market information, from the industry data that I've showed before to the vacancies, to the projections that I'll show. It's basically just to set realistic expectations. It's perception versus reality.
Can I ask a question about, for that particular data, on kind of future % of graduates continuing education in Minnesota?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how much you know the data set, but how are they determining those students? That maybe what I'm reading right now.
Yep, so this is all data that is given to us by the Office of Higher Education. So it shows that they were in a certain program, and then the following year they show up in a different program and not in wage records, then they'll show up in that column of continuing their education.
But we would assume that they have to, because
you can enroll in school but not declare a major, for example. So is that assuming that if someone enrolls in, goes to community college, gets their associate degree, and then enrolls at the University of Minnesota, that they're getting a bachelor's degree? Is that the assumption that they're making?
That's a great question, and I do not know.
Who would I talk to about that?
I'll ask you.
Okay.
Let's do it. Yep. So we looked at just one program here. Again, you can get quite a lot of data from this. So we look at all the programs here, the award levels. You can look at one specific area, such as business. So it's kind of cool to see, for instance, looking at accounting and related services. And always look for tabs when you use our tools. There's always going to be tabs at the top that have more information with them. And it looks, actually, this tool looks pretty overwhelming at first, but if you just, there's these question marks, if you just look at the tabs at the top, the definitions, you'll get what's going on pretty quickly. But yes, just looking at, for instance, actually I'll look at, accounting and related services for certificates. And certificates, actually, that's another thing to keep in mind. Certificates sometimes are gained after doing an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. So sometimes you'll see higher wages for these certificates than you might see for the bachelor's or associates. So keep that in mind. Also, we recommend that you look at the strengths of programs and not look at weaknesses, because there could be things you might not know about that program if you're looking at these weaknesses. For instance, theology might show that not a lot of people are finding employment. Well, maybe they're still continuing their education. Maybe they've moved on to different areas where these graduates are more likely to go. So definitely look more at the strengths if you're not just looking at specific programs. But yes, for accounting and related services, you can see here definitely median hourly wage will go up from associate's degree, so it's 15-17 here, bachelor's degree, 22-24 to a graduate degree, 25-76. So it makes sense, but it's nice to see the actual data. And again, this is not survey data. It's what you see is what it is. So that is the graduate employment outcomes. Any other questions on this guy? Yeah.
Do you know if the Office of Higher Education is using the same data sharing for different purposes, or do you work together with them to meet their needs on this data sharing agreement? Or
I believe it's just mutual collaboration of getting this tool out and showing the outcomes of graduates.
Do you want to talk a little bit about SLED, Bill?
How about you want to? You could.
Well, there's another. There are a couple of different efforts in this vein, and this one was done under a federal grant called Workforce Data Quality Initiative. There's another one called State Longitudinal Education Data System, and that one is probably bigger, but maybe a little bit, further behind in terms of a ton of useful output. But what they're going to try to do is bring in K-12 higher ed workforce and potentially then other types of data tools, that it could hypothetically bring information into the other types of things to be able to do some evaluation on a wide variety of issues. But that's sort of behind. So I think, yeah, higher education got plenty out of the whole process, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, so this is just a taste of some of that data, again, that you can get from the graduate employment outcomes. So again, when you're looking at the tabs, not only do they have definitions, but if you click on the tab, it'll put it in an ascending or descending order. And that's what I did with grads here. So the top ones for associate degree programs, bachelor degree programs, and graduate. So it's kind of cool to see, for instance, registered nursing. Sometimes you run into surprising things. Registered nursing is the #1 in-demand job right now for the state of Minnesota. You can see definitely a ton of people are going into that program, and they're finding employment. 84% are finding employment right here in the state of Minnesota. And knowing that some might go out of state to find employment, that could increase that number even more. The wages are really nice. But then if you look at reported full-time employment, you can see that only 39% of these registered nurses are finding full-time employment. So that might give you a realistic picture of what's going to happen based on what's happened in the past once you complete that program. And again, looking at these different programs, registered nursing, it's a job that maybe you're earning such a decent wage that you can support your family working part-time. It's also a job where when you start out, you're going to have those evening and night shifts. And you might even start out just with that part-time before going on the full-time with seniority. So really cool data.
Is there a way to find out what schools are included in this? Is it only state schools or is it also private?
It's state and private schools. And when you go to the site, there was a little drop-down bar for, you can look at all the institutions overall. You can look at private 4-year, public 2-year, vocational schools, career schools. You can look at the main categories. We don't have information on specific schools. I think they would be a little sensitive about releasing that information in case, I don't know, things weren't so great. But yes, you can definitely look at different institution types. Interesting to see law up here. Yeah, if you look at our projections, which I'll show in a bit here, the projected number of lawyers that we'll need going into the future is not a lot. Pretty saturated. Yeah, so the conclusions, obviously, the industries that are growing a lot right now, healthcare, certain areas of manufacturing, there are going to be areas that graduates, people thinking about going into post-secondary education should definitely look into, or finding employment and finding those decent wages after they're done. But also, just because this is, it doesn't show where these graduates are going to for work, I would suggest using this in concert with our other data tools. So looking at our occupations and demand tool or looking at our QCW or CES data, altogether can give you a really nice picture of what's happening in our economy and in our job market. So moving on, I think the last tool here that I'll talk about is our employment projections. So forecasting future trends, also really popular stuff. Useful not only for students thinking that, if I'm going to go to post-secondary education, because we look at occupation and industry data here, the occupation that I'm going into, is that going to be growing into the future? What's that picture like? And then city developers, planners, other people like that can also use the data to see which industries are projected to grow or projected to decline. This information is based largely in part on linear regression models that are sent to each of the states through the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The states then use state variables in place of the national variables. And these variables include everything from the labor force, participation rate, to the GDP, to school enrollment. There's just a whole bunch of things that are considered when looking at these linear regression models. Don't ask me what the actual model looks like. I have no idea. But Dave Senf is our projections guy here in Minnesota, and he's working constantly on this kind of stuff. So if you have any questions on this, he's also in our Talk to Our Experts, and he can answer almost any question on projections. We also have a projections party. There's pizza and everything. Pretty cool. But that's where we get after. So for instance, the BLS gave us this model. They put in the Minnesota variables and spit out that Minnesota is going to be growing by 11% between 2012 and 2022. Then we had our projections party, and one of the big things that we're taking into account, which actually the Minnesota State Demographic Center shows, is that our labor force here in Minnesota is not projected to stay at its current level. And that's just because so many people are going to be retiring, the population is aging, and that both of those together just have a big impact on these regression models that we have. We also looked at, are certain industries moving in or out, our employers, major employers moving in or out. So after we had that little projections pizza party, we brought the 11% growth over the 10-year period to 7% growth. And I guess the main point of all that is just to say that when you're looking at these projections, they're obviously not going to be 100% accurate. They were, I think Dave and some of the other guys wouldn't be working where they are. But they are really they show definitely a pretty accurate portrayal of the strength and direction that these different occupations and industries are moving towards by 2012 or 2022. I totally copied and pasted some of your guys' information. So there's actually a report from the Minnesota State Demographic Center, In the Shadow of the Baby Boomers. And is there any more updated information on that? Or new reports expected to come out?
Working on one right now.
Awesome. Because I definitely recommend checking out that In the Shadow of the Baby Boomers. Because one of the big things is that baby boomers, those born between 46 and 63, a ton of them are projected to retire in the coming years here. And they do account for sometimes these people holding on to their jobs longer. My parents are both 65. They're both still working. I have no idea if they're going to retire soon. They should. But even accounting for that, the number of people retiring is still going to be, the people entering the workforce, either through graduating or just immigrants coming in, it's going to be totally eclipsed by the people that are retiring. I stole my graphs. But this is looking at, just our population is getting older. They project that the number of the population 65 and older is going to double by what, 2030? Yeah. By which time, 1 in 5 Minnesotans will be 65 years of age or older. And then they also have this nice graph on migration. I feel weird talking about this with you guys. But this is their estimated projections for the number of migrants coming into the state of Minnesota. This is the goal here is the additional net migrants that Minnesota will need to maintain that 0.5% labor force growth. Obviously, there's huge differences here, and it's not likely that we will reach that. So the labor force participation rate is expected to go down to around 0.1% by 2020. And again, that has a big impact on that employment projection model that we use, and that's why we're at 7%. That's still equivalent to 205,000 new jobs between 2012 and 2022, and you can compare it to other decades. But here's the big number. So with all those people retiring, Minnesota is going to need a whole bunch of people to replace those people retiring. So there's still going to be job opportunities out there. When you go to this site, you can look at industries. You can break it down by industry. And again, you can look in-depth industry. Manufacturing is expected to remain largely stagnant, but if you look at fabricated metal, transportation equipment, food, machinery, things like that, those are actually projected to do fairly well. And here's some more data if you want to have fun over the weekend looking at it. And then we also look at occupations. So ton of occupational groups here. The main thing to see is that the blue is the new hires, the red is the replacement hires, and if you blur your eyes, and I guess it's blurry already, most of it is red. So just a bunch of replacement workers needed going forward. And here's some specific occupations and their growth. And then here's where we were talking about education. And this is where the BLS projects that most of the new occupations going forward by 2022 are expected to be occupations that only require a high school diploma. And then the second largest will not even require a high school diploma. And that's mainly due to our growing healthcare and jobs like personal care aides and home health aides. These are definitely jobs that are in demand right now.
Both new and replacement.
This is, yes, both new and replacement. So we've talked about a whole bunch of labor market information resources. Definitely check out our DEED website, and you can definitely find them through that data tab. But here are some other resources I would suggest checking out in concert with our LMI resources to get a full picture of what's happening in the nation, in our state, and in your local area. So U.S. data, definitely U.S. Census and the DLS. Minnesota data, plug for you guys, the Minnesota State Demographic Center. Minnesota Compass has a lot of the LMI data that we have, and some of it's actually, it's really cool stuff, and it's pretty visually pleasing too, nice pie charts and things like that. So definitely check out Minnesota Compass as well. And then the Twin Cities, the Met Council and Greater MSP have some great data. The U.S. Census Bureau actually just came out with their a release of 2009 to 2013 5-year estimates, and these cover almost all the communities in the United States. So definitely check those out. And I know that Todd Graham is having a thing on the American Community Survey in 2015. May, so definitely check that out. And then these are some other really great U.S. Census Bureau resources. On the Map is great for looking at commute and labor sheds. Quarterly workforce indicators, if you want to see demographics for different industry sectors, check that one out. County business patterns are great for looking at. I get a lot of questions sometimes about what is the breakdown of establishments in my local area? How big are the establishments in terms of employees? Migration, geographic mobility, county-to-county migration flows, and then small area income and poverty estimates. These are all great U.S. Census Bureau information sites. You'll notice when you see our data sites, none of it has named businesses attached to them. If you do want that information, check out Reference USA. All you need is a county library card, and then you can go to the county library website, punch in the PIN number, and you can get businesses that are in your local area, and you can break it down by name, industry, region, things like that. Pretty cool site. And then finally, I guess I was lying about employment projections, but the cost of living calculator is one of our newest tools. And again, it provides that yearly estimate of a basic needs budget in the state of Minnesota. And it breaks it down by these 7 categories. It's one of the Tableau updated websites that we have. And it's actually really easy to use because you can just plug in if you're a single person, different family configurations, how many children, what area are you looking at, and then the data below is automatically updated. So that's a really interesting tool to compare to our job vacancy numbers that we see for median wage offers and also our Minnesota salary survey, that OES data. Yeah, that's where I was looking at. Kind of what you brought up before about the basic needs budget for an individual and a family, and then comparing that to our OES. And it's between the 25th and the 50th percentile. Also, if you just don't want to dig into data, check out Trends and Review. Give me more plugs for our Labor Market Information Office here. But great resources and articles looking at just overall what's happening in the state economy. You can also call our helpline, or you can call me. And that's all I've got for you guys today. So thanks for coming. I think we're up with time, so you can head out. But if you have any specific questions or want to get any specific contacts, feel free to come.
How about you?